Welcome to Skin and Soul. I'm Gwenm Carsley, a transformational body, sex, and soul coach, and I'm inviting you on a bold, unfiltered journey into the heart of our humanity through the lens of Eros. This is where we strip away the shame, dive into the unspoken, and embrace the wild, raw truth of our desires. Together, we'll crack open the taboo, uncover our deepest intimacies, and awaken the pulse of our sexual essence. Because real transformation, it's messy, it's thrilling, and it's oh so delicious. Buckle up, loves. Skin and Soul Beyond the Pale starts in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Welcome back. I'm Gwenm. I'm your host of Skin and Soul Beyond the Pale, and I have with me today Tony Stewart, who has written an incredible memoir. It's called Carrying the Tiger, Living with Cancer, Dying with Grace, Finding Joy While Grieving. This is a very palpable topic, though it's told with a lot of humor, love, grace. It's a documented journey of his now former deceased wife, the journey of 7 years. But really, it's a love story. So I'm just going to start there. For me, it hit me as the most devotional love story that, really surpasses anything from Romeo and Juliet. It is how it struck me. There was so much beautiful devotion in that. And it's one told that was under pressure of terminal illness, time, uncertainty. And so, and the journey continues, which is beautiful. But I want to start there today in the love story. Because as we were talking and I said to you, what I love about your journey is that it wasn't, the day that you found out what it was, that the stage 4, right, that she had stage 4 cancer. But you bring us in beautifully by talking about the life that you guys had together, right? That there was so much life. You traveled, and I'll let you tell a little bit of that story of you traveled, you already had that aliveness. So I guess my first curiosity is around what was it like then when you got the news? So just tell us a little bit more about the life you had first.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Lynn Couture was her name, my lovely wife. Lynn and I had been together 30 years at the time of the diagnosis. So it was closer to 35 by the time she died. She was a painter, an artist. She painted still life paintings, fruits and things on a tabletop that were completely out of fashion for most of her career. And it didn't matter. This is what she did, what she needed to do. And I love that about her, that, every day she went to the studio and she just worked on paintings. And I had a much more, I wouldn't call it a normal career, but I did all kinds of things. I made films for a while. I was a business consultant, whatever. But during the each of the year, we would be separated for sometimes days at a time because of my work. So we decided quite early on that, okay, there are two things we decided. One is quantity time is as important as quality time. So it was interesting because I used to try to say, well, I'm back. Let's do this wonderful thing and this other thing. And she made it really clear. No, wait a minute. I need to just spend time with you. I need you to be with me as well as doing some wonderful thing or other. But when very frequent flyer miles for years, and we said, what can we do with all these things? We started 2 years before the events of Carrying the Tiger, we started taking these wonderful trips once a year, like 4 weeks to India, 5 weeks to India or Southeast Asia, where we would just let everything else slide around and be together and have adventures together.
Yeah, and I remember you saying when you finally proposed to her, because you were worried about the age difference at first, and you broke up with her, right, and said I can't deal with the age difference because of what you had witnessed with your dad, and then in the end, you were like, no, I'm back. I made a mistake. And she said, well, I'll marry you, but only if you promise to kiss me every day. Right? First, last, right?
If Lynn had known about mindfulness, she would have been like an exemplar of mindfulness. The kissing was like rushing out the door to go to work. If I gave her a peck, she would grab me. And so that's not a real kiss. You stop and you give me a real kiss before you go out the door. And she didn't mean a giant, sexy smooch necessarily. She meant one where I was present, where my mind wasn't half read out the door, where it was like the two of us connecting. She was like that in so many ways. She got me talking about my feelings with her over the course of the.
Indoctrinated you pretty quickly into presence, right? Like you're here with me now, that if we're gonna, that it's connection. And you do a lot of talking as as you move through the illness. Like there's no holding back. And I think it's part of what I mean, you're so candid. It's in your story. There's nothing that's held back. So I just want to take a moment to, what was your experience when you found out that she did indeed, like it was worse than you thought, yeah. So just if you can.
We had no idea she had cancer. She had some medical issues that no one thought were cancer, digestive issues, things like that, because we'd been chasing her down for months. And then one day, through, just happens that they scanned her spine because of a lot of pain in her spine, and that showed tumors in her lungs. That she had no lung-related issues. So suddenly, the first thing we hear is, you've got metastasized stage 4 cancer that's in your lungs and in your spine. Real. This is something that can take years to develop to reach that point. And by the time it does, unless you are wonderfully lucky with some miracle drug that doesn't, there is no miracle drug for most people. It's a death sentence. And we discovered within a few days, most people who have that diagnosis die within 6 months to 2 years.
Yeah, and she had 7 years, and so you went on to this journey.
Yes.
And I think I just wanted to get a moment of, and I asked this question because it's personal to me. I remember when my wife at the time got her diagnosis, and I literally felt the ground leave from under my feet, right? And I was so conflicted. A slightly different circumstance to where you were, but I was holding both this like, oh my God, this can't be true. Like holding this grief, and kind of having a sense of like what lies ahead, and me feeling like, oh, I can't be here. Like I just wanted to get outside of my body. So I just, holding both of like so much love, and I can't be sitting, like I can't do this.
So our situation was a little different than that, and our personalities, presumably. The night we got the call, it wasn't a diagnosis. It was her GP calling to say, I'm looking at the scan report, and we've got these tumors. You need to see an oncologist right away. So scary as shit. But we didn't know. But I said to you now about, life expectancy, we did not know that minute. We just thought, this sounds really serious. And we went in two different directions. I, by nature, get very cool when faced with a crisis. That doesn't mean I'm not churning in some way inside, but it's just who I am. I instead of running around like this or road or whatever, it's like, okay, what do we do next? What's the next step? It's very much about getting from here to tomorrow to the day after. Glenn, I would say she also didn't get wildly emotional, but it was much more emotional than me. And it's her body and her life that we were talking about. She let me do research, and she helped me, but she let me take the lead on, we need to call this doctor, we need to call that doctor. I'm going to sit up till 2 a.m. on the web researching things, etc. She was like, I can't do that. She started to, but then it was like, I can't do that. That scares me too much. Mm-hmm. That stuff. And meanwhile, we both agreed to do it tacitly, implicitly at the beginning, and later explicitly when we talked about it weeks later, months later, was try and give her normal life as much as possible. What she wanted was to be able, to the extent possible, to not get sucked into worrying, where will this take me? How long do I have? How horrible is that procedure when we get to procedures later? She wanted to be able to have conversations with her friends that were like the old conversations. She didn't want to spend an hour talking about procedures and cancer with her best friends. And she wanted to be able to go to the studio and keep painting. And a lot of what we did over the next few years, whether we realized it or not, as a direct goal, had the effect of giving her that.
Well, that's great because I was wondering if, like, from what I had witnessed, from what treatment can do, is get sucked down the treatment and exactly what you're talking about, right? Get down, it becomes like this. That's what the trajectory is the
Right.
next treatment, the next treatment. And within that, how much life gets stripped away little bit by little bit. And you do describe that, right? In each blog post of showing where there were openings where life could surface again, if you will, right? I mean, she went through, I don't know, what, 3, 4, or 5 spinal surgeries, and severe radiation. Her spine was collapsed. I mean, there was like a lot happening. And, did you, as you got deeper into treatment, did you ever get to this place of like, is this worth it?
Not for years. We did eventually. Eventually, we stopped treatment. Eventually, we decided it's not worth it. Pretty much all of the different challenges we faced in those 5 years, and I should just explain, we were very, very lucky to Lynn got into a clinical trial for a miracle drug that was being investigated that had the possibility of, well, it had the tiny possibility of eliminating her cancer entirely, but that almost never happened. It didn't happen to her. But it ended up holding down her tumors, so they stopped growing for years. So all of these multiple procedures were because of the damage that it had done to her spine right at the beginning, before we even knew about it. And then further damage done by trying to get the tumors that were in her spine and kill them, that damaged her spine also. So she had multiple procedures, hospitalizations, and outpatient procedures for years involving her spine. But in those cases, even when it got horrible, even when she was in the hospital for weeks and an infection and delirium, with that, we just need to get through this because that drug is holding down her cancer. And we'll just get through this physical problem and get her out of the hospital. And she did almost die in the hospital at one point from an infection. But we were thinking she would die.
Coming back, and I think what did you realize about like living life in those moments? Like how did you really grasp onto the juices of life when she's in pain, right? And I think there's a point where you talk about, you don't even realize how exhausted you are, how depleted you are. It takes you years, I think, before, is it a year and a half at least?
I had a
year.
But I really answer the question that you keep asking and I keep not answering.
Good for evasion. Good for you.
I mean, we're zooming in on all the bad stuff. I'm mentioning hospitalization and almost dying, but the real love story part is how we helped each other to just notice the beauty that was around us, to spend time in the early days before the worst of her spine, and then later after the treatments had fixed it up. We were like roking through Central Park to get to the doctor's appointments. We live in New York City. Luckily, we got treatments in New York City, and there are things that normally you would take a taxi or the subway or something, and it really walk. And really, because it gave us a chance, it gave her a chance to be outside, to go right through. We went through Central Park where they have a beautiful nature that's there, and we noticed it. She noticed it. There's a wonderful moment. It's this tiny little moment in the book. Later on, she's like in urgent care, waiting for a hospital room, and like so many people, it's happened to so many people. She's like stuck on a bed in a hallway for 36 hours because there were no beds upstairs in the hospital available yet. And we spent a lot of time talking, like laughing and talking about the little architectural details that they had put in when they renovated this. Like, well, look how that join of the ceiling meeting the wall. We're not into architecture. It was just something that we could look at and appreciate. In that case, not natural but man-made. And I didn't even think about it until I was putting the book together, and seeing all the notes we took and the journal entries, and I realized, oh yeah, during that horrible 36 hours, when we spent most of the time trying to figure out, when to flag down a nurse to get her to help her get to the bathroom because the nurses were so busy. But we were also like laughing about how silly this situation was and having fun conversations that aren't in the book at all with the people around us, and then looking at these silly architectural details, and you realize, no, just looking for some joy, life, whatever. No.
Yeah. And there's so much, so you do, when you write, you've got so much humor, and it's apparent about how each precious moment is lived in the moment. And the reason I'm just going back to, for a moment, where it took you a year to ask for help, right? Because there's a lot of, I know in my own experience that there is guilt. There is, I think, a survivor's guilt, right? Of like, and what can I do? And it's about the other person. And we take for granted that the other person has all of the support around them. I mean, if you're lucky, obviously, but everybody's attention is on the illness, on the person with the illness. And it's very easy to get lost in that circus. And you say, like, there's a point in time, and you talk about it really frankly, where you're like, intimacy changes. Like, it's one thing to live with someone who's got 6 months to live. It's another when someone is living 7 years, and physical intimacies are not there, not in the same way. So what did intimacy start to feel and look like for you?
This plays out over the 5 or 6 years. In the beginning, I mean, if we're talking about physical intimacy, we're talking about sex. Lynn's body.
Emotional, yeah.
Emotional. I mean, we were emotionally intimate all the way along. And that's huge. Mm-hmm. Encouraged me in so many ways. So in that first year, when I hadn't gotten help for myself, like later I got a therapist, I became, I was, we could no longer have intercourse. It just hurt her too much. I mean, it hurt her back too much. But we touch each other, and having versions of sex, except that at times she was in too much pain. And actually, honestly, I'll say on this show, I don't usually say, she encouraged me to masturbate. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't want my situation to deprive you of sexual pleasure. Which is kind of wonderful if you think about it.
It's so what a gift, right? Like, to be that open in the relationship, and to realize, like, I mean, I can see that you were, the two of you were so beautifully connected, and just an honesty, like that you were able to be honest and open with yourself, like so much so, right?
Except that during that first year, the stuff that I was not saying to her, and I don't want she had encouraged me to masturbate in that first year, because what I hadn't told her was I really miss having sex the way we used to. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really did. And I thought, if I tell her that, it'll shatter her. She's already worried. She would express many times that she was worried that moving so much from me was going to push me away. And so I reassured her many times during that year, don't worry. And meanwhile, in the back of my head, I would occasionally have these treasonous thoughts like, well, maybe it would be better if she died sooner rather than later, because this is horrible for me.
Yeah.
When I didn't share that with anyone until about a year in, I actually had a bit of a breakdown. And we came back from a very difficult day, or all sorts of things had gone wrong medically. And
you've had a whole bunch of things. I mean, I always say, like, the universe is like teaching you something, right? Whether it's you got sick, you had your bike accident, like it was like one thing, and like you burnt your hand, right? Yeah. You had all of these series of things happen, and it was like, stop.
Yeah, I finished my bike. I gave myself, I think, for second or almost third degree burns on my hand, and had to see a plastic surgeon for weeks as we monitored to see if there was going to be skin grafts, which I did not end up needing. And I mean, I was just having these horrible accidents that came from being distracted and exhausted and not there for myself, because I was just, I tell the story in Carrying the Tiger. I tell the story about the bike accident, and I'm riding in the pouring rain. I was riding for fun, for exercise in the country. It's one of the things I did then. for exercise. And I'm out on a road bike, and it starts to be a thunderstorm. And any sane person, when the rain is coming down in sheets, and there's lightning, and there's wind, and there's no visibility for the cars, any sane person will just look for some shelter and stop and wait it out. It's the summer thunderstorm. It's going to be gone in half an hour. Did I do that? No. I'm riding along, bent over the handlebars, saying to myself, you can do this. You can do this. You can do this. And later I realized that that had been my mantra in terms of taking care of Loon.
Well, and that was literally the storm. Like, actually, as you're describing it, I'm like, that's the storm you were facing. And it's kind of like, I'm going to plow myself through it. And in that, I think there's a lot of numbing that takes place. Like, I'm not going to feel my own needs. I'm not going to feel my own stuff.
Yes.
And thank you again for just saying it outright, even talking about sexual intimacy, right? It's a very real part of like all the things that we deny ourselves, like, oh my God, I need some fun, or I need physical touch. I need these parts of my life. And is this over? And while you're in this container, it's so, it changes, right? Life changes into a very different trajectory of just what is the day.
Yes. Yes. And I'm really pleased to say that after that breakdown, Rune, I was having the breakdown telling her that I couldn't keep doing this, telling the things that I had not told her in the whole year. I told her those things that I had been thinking. And I was terrified, but this was it. It was going to be like that time 30 years earlier when I broke up with her saying, you're too old for me. And then she basically swore at me and,
I'm sorry.
Never talk to me like that again. She was over 10 years older than me. It was fine. But age difference doesn't matter if you love someone, if you make each other happy. Anyway, I was terrified that she would like curse me and throw me out, which is nuts. And instead, she literally pulled me to her. She pulled me to her, and she touched her forehead to mine, and she said, I understand. And she had had a therapist for years and had been seeing a therapist that whole year. And she said, I think you should get a therapist, which was, other people will have different ways of coping. But it was someone that I could talk to, who I could say those things to. That's more as I wanted, without worrying about hurting one. And that was huge for me over the next 6-7 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need that person that we can talk to without judgment, where there's nothing at stake, where it's not like the effect isn't hitting the other person, the impact isn't there. We can just hear back their own thoughts. But I just want to say, like, oh, what an angel, right? What a wise soul that she was, because to be able to embrace you in her own pain, which it sounds like, when I was reading, I was like, what a remarkable human. It's like, just to embrace life in every moment. And you talk about like the small things, like just having dinner all the time together, the walks, those cherished moments, like you said, like looking at architecture, whatever it is, that you really took life, like I said, this preciousness, even when it's at its darkest. Because as I was reading, I was like, I don't know if I could do that journey. Like, and not even from your perspective, from her perspective, that there's, and she would say, there's so much fear in going into like, what's the greater good? What's the lesser fear? This operation or this medication?
Yeah.
Right?
She was, the thing from the very beginning, she said, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of pain. I don't want to go through a whole lot of pain. And damn it, one thing after another came along that brought pain. And she was so strong, because in each case, there is the promise, as I was saying before, these were not end-of-life situations on their own. There would be a spinal surgery or something, or a treatment that sounded like it might be painful, but for a little while.
Yeah, something to move through.
Each time she ended up saying, I like being alive. I like what I've got. I don't want to give it up yet. Let's do this. Time and time again. for about 5 or 6 years until eventually the drug got out of control, and there wasn't going to be any getting through it anymore.
And do you think there was ever is there any kind of thing that you would change along the way? Any treatment you would change? I mean, and I know regret is like, it's not the place. It's just, is there anything that you look at and go, oh, I wish we would have left that or done that?
Yeah. When the cancer beat the first set of drugs after about 5 or 6 years and came rolling back over a period of time, which would be like most people's experience in the first place. I mean, in the absence of a miracle drug, I know that it's like when it takes over your body, because that's what happened to Lynn in the last year. We had the opportunity for another clinical trial. And we had such good luck with the first clinical trial that we ended up going for this other, even more experimental clinical trial, meaning fewer people. It was earlier stage for that drug. And it involved saying goodbye to our beloved oncologist temporarily. It's like, you do this trial, we're going to have this other person as your major oncologist and these nurses. And at this point, we had done, this was all within Sloan Kettering, the big cancer hospital, which is a different part of it. Those last 6 months or even 4 months that she was in that trial were wasted. We kept beating ourselves up. She kept accepting more and more pain and indignity because we hoped that this was going to work, even though the writing on the wall was not particularly good, but it wasn't definitive. Oh, we think maybe. Give it more time. And so the only thing I would say, and it's a tiny thing, is, yeah, if I could, I would go back and start hospice and palliative care earlier. By the time that whole sequence of things with this drug that ended up not working, by the time she decided, I'm not doing this anymore, it's time to stop, the cancer was already so far advanced that she only had about 2 weeks from then until she died. We did home hospice together. Most beautiful 2 weeks of my life. Amazing to be with someone in the last weeks of her life when she was not in significant pain anymore during that time, mostly. That I think that would have been kind of wonderful if we could have had 2 or 3 months and a slower glide towards that and not gone through the excruciating experiences of those 2 or 3 months as the cancer was getting worse, but we kept trying to deal with it, which meant these horrible visits to the doctors again and again, and
getting lost down the rabbit hole is what I find in the medical field. It's all about preserving life. Usually, oftentimes, an oncologist, thank God, knows when to stop. I love that. It's Dr. Hellman, right, that said, it's enough, right? This is the time to let it go, and it's so important to know when to let go. And I think, she had this moment where where that panic moment, I think, where it was like, oh, am I making the right decision? Right? It's like, oh, I want to see. And then as soon as you read those reports, it was like, oh yeah, no, there's a sense of, surrender the right word, or would it be relinquishing? What do you feel like she was letting go of life with ease, or was it a massive fight for her in terms, because she was so full of life?
At that point, it was comparatively easy for her. The irony, and I gather this is very common, is that I was the one who was having trouble. I was the one who was saying, maybe we should go in for a couple of doses of radiation. When Dr. Hellman called, even though he was no longer her primary treating doctor, but he was being copied on these reports. And he was the one, he called at the moment that Lynn and I were having this conversation in which she was like, I don't want to go back to the hospital. I really don't want to go back to the hospital. And I was saying, maybe just another couple of days. And Dr. Hellman called and said, I think sometimes you have to say enough is enough. And this might be that time. And with both of us permission, and especially me as spouse, as the partner, to back off, because I think Lynn was ready to make that decision, and I was the one. It was for me. It was like, I don't want to disappoint Tony. So
Mm.
if Tony wants more time with me, I don't want to disappoint Tony. Maybe I should do this thing. She hadn't actually gone to it. We were in the middle of this conversation. I look back on that and think, oh my God, thank God she didn't agree to it. Thank God we started hospice that night. It was just
Gave her some relief.
So in watching, so you had these beautiful 2 weeks, and a lot of people experience those really intimate moments, right? Like when you just in being, like you said, you didn't even have to speak, and she got to a point where she couldn't really speak. How do you think your relationship to whether it's God, spirit, has changed from before to then and now?
uh, okay. So in terms of traditional religion, I always called myself an atheist, but not a scientist. I don't believe that science has all the answers. I'm, I'm, but I definitely don't subscribe to any of the official religions, and like whether it's one God or a group of Hindu gods or whatever. That's never worked for me. But I was always willing to believe there's something more. Except I kind of leaned towards the idea that when you die, it's just like going to sleep and it's all over and too bad for you. Being with someone you love deeply who dies makes you want to some kind of afterlife. Let me tell you, and there were some really cool sort of signs, some things that happened after she died, where it's very hard to say, oh, that's a coincidence. It's much easier to believe we somehow made that happen. And I talk about a couple of those in the book, and I think it's very clear. So I would say that I am now more open, both because of, gosh, I'd really love to know that little spirit is having a good time somewhere. I'm absolutely convinced that if you get to keep having a spirit, and in some sense of self that goes into that spirit, one is incapable of having a bad time based on external circumstances. She will find a way to be having a good time, and I want her to be having that good time, whatever it may be. I'm much more believing of that than there was before.
So when she passed, right? So I am, and like holding on to those moments, there is a moment when someone passes where, and I think you thought you were going to escape grief, right? I think most of us do. I thought I would escape grief. Sorry, I was pulling something up because I love the way you, if you don't mind, I'm gonna read it. It's from your book and it's on grief. You say, I have been using wave as a metaphor to describe the sudden arrival of fierce, piercing grief, a longing for Lynn so powerful that I have no option but to let the tears flow. I've become adept at walking, cycling, cooking, brushing my teeth, even shaving with a blade while sobbing. But just as in the ocean, beneath the waves is a tide of sorrow and longing that ebbs and flows with its own rhythm. And when the tide is in, the waves are taller and stronger and crash with more force. That still gives me shivers and brings up what, tears?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's grief is, and I'm wondering, did you have the feeling of grief as you were going, like, were you already grieving death before it had even arrived, or was that like not even in the question? Or did you feel like you had done all the grieving during the journey, and so when you passed the threshold, you were like, I'm good, I was ready to let go?
So there's what did I consciously think and what was actually going on in hindsight. Consciously, it was the second thing you said, that, Lynn and I had these 2 weeks of saying goodbyes to each other. The first week, at least, of hospice, she was still talking reasonably well. And we talked about all kinds of stuff, and we said our goodbyes, and we speculated about what would happen after she died and all kinds of things. And oh boy, when she died, I thought my grief was going to be shorter and shallower than most people's, because, not many people have lived to have such lovely goodbyes, and also all the years leading up to it. That's what I consciously thought, and it was completely blown away by the depth of my grief. The total didn't work out that way, and I don't think it works out for anyone who loses someone they deeply love, even though everyone's grief is different. what was really going on, and clearly there was what they call anticipatory grief, a kind of a technical sounding phrase, but you know that for 7 years I had been anticipating Gwen's death, and been anticipating her death, and then the loss of what we had, and also we incrementally lost the ability to know that kinds of things over those 7 years. From the get-go, we weren't going to be traveling to India or Asia ever again, because we couldn't be, we couldn't be traveling to California because we wouldn't want to be more than a few hours away from her doctors, because things kept, every now and then something would go wrong on it and turn on a dime, and like we're heading into the ER, watching care.
Yeah, don't you think, like, so many people take their time to think, I'm going to do it later, I'm going to do it later, right? And then cancer or a lot of illnesses make it so that you can't, right? It's like that's taken away, but you had done it. So probably felt, I don't know, but that you were involved already in life, and that it wasn't something out there in the future, that you'd already been always doing the living as you were going along.
Consciously said to each other, when we first started doing those big trips, Lynn was probably late 30s and I was late 30s. And we said, look, I got all these frequent flyer miles. Let's start going to cool places, because you never know when something will happen and we won't be able to do it anymore. Yeah. We consciously said that 20 years earlier. And lo and behold, that's exactly
foreshadowing of it, right? So when she did pass, so I just want to make, because there's so much I want to cover. And we have about, 10, 15 minutes. I want to touch into this void, right? That once the person is gone, right? So it's this long journey of purpose. You focus into this intense purpose of treatment, keeping aliveness going, keeping connection going, keeping this person that you love with you. And then there's the moment it does break, when it's gone.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you can just speak for a moment to the void, because I don't know how you experience it. So, just briefly, like for me, it's the crying is almost a relief. The crying to me is a release, right? It's a relief to cry.
And it's a proof of connection.
Yeah.
It's a connection. And I loved it. I mean, I hated it because it was taking over my life. And when in the early means, that sobbing was so powerful, it felt like I couldn't hardly do anything. Although, as I said, I'd be riding my bike steeply downhill and start crying. What are we going to do? We're going to figure out how to keep going. Underneath that, the void is the loss of everything. I mean, your life changes. Your life changes. It is something different. That happens when you discover your partner has an incurable illness, absolutely, and it sure as heck happens when your partner dies, even if you anticipated it. Suddenly, all of these things that were part of your life, tiny things, big things, all those things, they're not the same anymore. And I certainly spent a long time in that kind of disoriented, shattered space where I couldn't quite figure out what to do, how to spend the day, how was I going to move forward. But it was like every life again without Lynn. And then slowly, things happen. And you start, it's kind of like, unless you're going to die sympathetically, as sometimes happens with older couples, where the one dies really soon after the other, it's like, I'm not going to live anymore, and you'll give up. Unless something like that's going to happen.
But you met your current partner, right? It's a Cordelia. Yeah. So you met your current partner, which I would imagine was probably quite controversial. I could see like you met her, two months after Lynn had passed.
Zoom and email.
Through email, and built a relationship, like slowly, but it came pretty apparent quite quickly that there's attraction here, and that there's life. And I would imagine that there was a lot of duality between, I feel guilt, I want this, but I feel guilt, I've got loyalty over here. How do I love two people at the same time? Can you be polyamorous from the dead to the life, right?
Lynn had explicitly given me permission to have another relationship, but when we had that conversation, we both assumed it would be 2, 3, 4 years later. And here I was starting to fall for someone 2, 3, 4 months later, still totally and completely in love with and crying for and missing Lynn. And it was horribly provoking. And I mean, the first time that Cordelia and I had sex, when she was from another city, and the first time she passed through New York after we realized in this long distance relationship that we were attracted to each other, we fell into bed together. I think we both knew it was like guaranteed we would do that at least once, and then neither of us knew what would happen after that. Would it also blow up? So we were intimate, and she was actually sexually more my ideal sexual partner than Lynn had been. That's a very moral thing that didn't matter to me. It's something in 30 years you discover that there are things that one of you likes to do and gets pleasure from, and the other, it just doesn't work for them. And we, over, on American marriage, we figured out, okay, that we're not going to do those things. We're going to do the things that give us both pleasure. So Cordelia shows up in my life, and it turns out that she's excited by exactly the stuff that I haven't done in 30 or 40 years.
There's a gift.
And it was a gift. And it also, we go to bed, we have fun time sexually, and I look up, and there's Lynn's on the other side of my bedroom, because it's only been a few months. I haven't buried her ashes yet. It was during COVID, and we wouldn't have an in-person gathering until much later. We buried her ashes a year and a half later. And my God, I felt so guilty, completely, totally. I had just betrayed Lynn, and I had betrayed her doubly. I had betrayed her in the way that didn't matter so much, having a relationship with another woman. She gave me permission for that. I had betrayed her by having sexual fun of the kind I hadn't been able to have with her, with this other woman. And that, which is not explicitly in the book, it was such a major guilt factor for me. Yeah. And a long time.
So what do you think you've learned about love and intimacy to date?
I think that intimacy is the heart of love. Intimacy and paying attention and spending time are the heart of love. And it's not the sex. Except that sex is a gateway to intimacy. It's a shared activity that you do only together, or that we do specially together. But the fact of the underlying intimacy, that you're willing to do these things together, taking a walk, or appreciating something that or sharing something hard and scary. These intimacies are the heart of love for me. I had a hard time saying we love each other. We were really not into that. We were totally into saying that we were each other's best friend. And for me, that's the best love there is having someone with you that much who is your best friend, who you can share anything with.
So I didn't get to ask this question, and I do want to get to what is normally the questions that I get to ask my guests in a moment. And just very briefly, can you tell us what carrying the tiger is?
Oh, carrying the tiger was a gift to us as a phrase. A friend wrote Lynn an email saying that in her Tai Chi group, the friends said that they carry tigers for people they know who are experiencing difficult challenges. And that the three motions, as she described them, of bending the rudder, picking up the tiger, and putting it on a mountaintop far away, make that tiger much less threatening. And Lynn wrote back saying, I love that. Would you carry a tiger for me? And also, would you teach me how to carry tigers? And so I think of that as the challenges. It's the three parts of carrying a tiger, facing cancer, the hospice, learning handling death and finding a good death. And then for me, after she died, finding my way forward and finding joy in life again. Those are three different tigers that all needed to be carried.
That brought up like another question, which I'll try to phrase it in here. So I'm going to ask you in the 10 questions. Firstly, what is one truth your body has always known that your mind took years to catch up to?
My body has always known that I need naps.
Here.
Time to make peace with that.
Now, what's the most intimate moment you've ever had that had nothing to do with sex?
Wow.
I think it's
These
the
are the-
book of it. It's read the book, right?
Really, it was
Pardon?
the, it was, it's to me called it. It was the night that we got that first phone call and we sat together holding hands that night, before we knew how any of this was going to play out, and told each other, I love you again and again. And I just said that in our previous 30 years of relationship, we hardly ever said that. And we probably said it 20 times that night. That was this coming together like we're not just best friends. You are my partner, my soulmate, and we're going to face this together. Peace and calmness, in a way. Uh, I wrote the book for this purpose, but I realize I've gone through life trying to help the people around me be able to take that deep breath when facing something hard
Mm.
and not and be centered and find their way forward without freaking out or being overwhelmed emotionally by this difficult thing.
I think you just answered the question I wanted to ask you at the end, which is, how do you carry the tigers now? With breath, with calm, with peace, with
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Well, so mindfulness, I'm taking mindfulness course route and another a lot of more meditation and yoga than I used to. I find incredibly helpful.
Yeah. It's there for a reason. It's centuries old for a reason, or
Yeah.
thousands of years old for a reason. Yes.
Yeah.
If pleasure were a language, what would your first word be?
Please?
Mm, please. Now, if your erotic life had a title, like a novel or a film, what would it be called?
I'm sorry, counting the tiger, but that's just a joke. It doesn't. Erotic life had a title. I'm here for wood.
Thank you. What's the one thing you've never said out loud, but you wish someone would ask you about?
You've stumped me. I'm a shy guy, and that's a very real kind of question.
Mm.
And I shut down. My inner mind shuts down, trying to think of something that I'm really.
Hmm.
Um, can you tell me what someone else has said? I'm just.
Yeah, one thing that I think that comes up a lot is, how are you? But I think that's not true for you because I don't know, but just looking at all of the posts, you know, it's
Yeah.
yeah, a genuine like how are you I think comes hard for most people.
Mhm.
But I think you've been very blessed in what I've read in posts and so on that there was a genuine concern and
I've been comfortable with how are you long before carrying the tiger, asking it as well as being asked. I almost compulsively tell the truth about how I am rather than give a polite answer. It's not
beautiful. Okay.
good.
So, what part of your erotic self are you still afraid to bring to the light?
Do you know that right now I'm in such a mutually open relationship that I have brought to the light pretty much all the things that I carried within me.
Mm.
I will say for a while I thought actually I'm not trans. I'm not interested in not being a guy, but there's a part of me that would kind of like to be a gay woman.
Mm.
That would, as if I wanted to, but it's not strong enough to feel like I'm not carrying, I'm not a woman trapped in this body,
Yeah.
but a little bit of that in me.
Exploring the feminine. You can explore your feminine side without wanting, there's we all have that within us, right? The feminine, the masculine, and play in the realms, and yeah. Okay. So
Go ahead.
what dies in you when you pretend, and what comes alive in you when you don't?
The world comes alive when I don't pretend.
What
Uh,
comes alive? Sorry,
I missed the word.
the whole world.
the whole
But
world.
when I pretend, I'm not really there. Again, I've got this, let me come back to you next week and I'll have all this formulated.
No, they're not. It's good. This isn't like these are, the things that show up viscerally. And I think that's a beautiful answer. The whole world comes alive when you don't pretend. And I think that's very true. That the world shuts down when we do.
Yeah, but the fact that it's like drawing a kind of a curtain between me and the world. And it also is incredibly tiring. If you're pretending, you're creating this fake world, this fake you, and in order to keep it going, that means you can't just be yourself. It means you're being this other thing, which takes a lot of energy the more you do it. So I'm at a place in my life where I do a lot less pretending than I did when I was 20, 30, 40 years old. And I was pretending to fit in. I had trouble figuring out how I fitted into the world. And now I'm so much more comfortable just being me that I can say, but it took a lot of energy trying to figure out how to be the way I thought people wanted me to be.
Yep. Takes a lot of energy. And I think many people don't realize that they are doing it and that it's sapping their energy because they're so used to the pretending. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to finish this sentence. When I leave this life, I want my skin to remember.
I want my skin to remember the sensation of stroking smoothly down a cheek of someone I love. Oh, that's a wonderful, soft feeling, and I like it.
Thank you. And if the soul has a scent, what does yours smell like today?
It's a kind of flower today, but I'm terrible on names of flowers. It smells like a nice, mild, sweet floral scent today.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to share about your experience? Because I think this has been a very palpable topic.
The one thing we didn't get into is how incredibly helpful it was to me to be so open with all of our friends. That if you read Carrying the Tiger, you discover that it springs out of all of these journal entries that we wrote on a website to stay in touch with our friends. It was a private sort of thing. And that caused me to write about what was going on. And in the end, those posts became the genesis, the core of Carrying the Tiger, the book. The number of benefits that Lynn and I got from being open like that, which we didn't anticipate, was immeasurable. Junky sentence. I just said it sort of backwards, but it was fantastic that the more we shared about what was really going on with ourselves and with our friends, the more support and strength we got back that we did not anticipate. And then you can read the book and you can see example after example of that. But that's one of the one lesson from the book is open like that rather than keeping the stuff secret or with only one or two friends paid off in spades hugely. And the other reason I wrote the book was to show that everything we go through is normal. There's all of this. I wanted to talk about all of the messy feelings, the messy physical things that happen, because I think that a lot of people who are going through both the cancer experience, living with cancer, having a party with cancer, or the group experience, where it's mainly we're talking about emotions.
Yeah, just the relational aspect is so real.
It's so real. And people get feeling this way and they don't share it, which drives back to my first point. That goes through you is normal. And you're going in when you're in such difficult circumstances, be embarrassed. Don't hide from it. Don't run from it. Accept it and just accept this is the way it is right now. This is what it's like to be in this kind of situation. It'll be
dive into it, right? Like to be in there. Sorry, I just want to say, go repeat because we cut out a little bit so that, not to hide from the embarrassment, the grief, the difficulties, the challenging emotions, and that we can hold both, right? The grief and the joy. And I wish, sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I had started like with what is carrying the tiger, but because it's such a beautiful concept, and it's something that I learned in I go to Toastmasters, and so somebody brought up this great conversation that the opener was one of the greatest prescriptions, more than medicine, whatever, is asking for help, right? That there's no side effects. It's long-term effects go on beyond what you can see. And it's also, I think, healing for others to be able to give that as well, to give that support, because then they're taken on to the journey. And you really had a lot of people pass away during that time, which we can't touch on anymore today. But I just wanted to bring in, this book for everyone, for anyone who's going through grief or going through this journey. It's such a beautiful read. It's a palpable read. It's very real, but it has a lot of humor. There's no pretense in it. It's exquisitely written. It's written as a blog that's gone through the 7 years, like chosen blogs, and through the I think it was Caring Bridge at the time, blog that people could comment into, so he could just share the experience. So for anyone who is going through this or curious, I really invite you to read this book, Grieving the Tiger, and Tony Stewart, right? You can go to his website. Is it TonyStewartAuthor.com?
Yes.
Yes, if you want to know more around grief, grieving, and really embracing life on multiple levels. I have to leave it there. For anyone else who is interested in working with me, you can find me at GwenmCarsley.com. I'm a body, sex, and soul coach. This is also part of what I do. This is the holistic aspect of it. So I just want to thank you so much for having the courage to come on, but also the courage for writing what you did so exquisitely. And so I think it will help a lot of people. So thank you. Yeah. And I'm just going to say to everyone else, have a wonderful week, and ciao. A la mañana. Thank you for listening to Skin and Soul with me, Gwenm. Join me Fridays at 10 a.m. PST, Transformation Talk Radio. Catch the podcast anytime on your favorite platforms. You can follow me on Instagram at Luvology. Ready to take the next step? Book a compatibility call with me at GwenmCarsley.com.